Pick a couple things to focus on at once. Life's a menu. I don't got to read all the books, be incorporating all the tactics, all the habits, all the time. Not practical. It's a blessing. It's amazing that you have this abundance, this overabundance of things to choose from. You know? These difficulties are what great stuff comes from. You know, the good days are necessary, of course. You know, you are going to need some prime operating days to make some real progress on some things. But what if you can always make progress? And you can make progress in different types of ways on days where you don't have your optimal resources or your optimal energy or, you know, your full faculties on deck. What if the natural, unwavering, you know, sense of determination, momentum, and just forward progress, your natural forward progress, what if that doesn't have to be stopped or halted ever? It's always just being channeled and redirected and course corrected. You know, today, for example, a rough several nights sleep isn't going to keep me from making some meaningful progress, whether in the real, actual working world or, you know, mentally, in my psyche, you know, in my character. All these other ways that you wouldn't think of as ways that you can make progress even when you're not at your best. You know, you can always shift. You know, you can spend a period of low energy or a period of limitations listening to something you enjoy, listening to a podcast that resets your mental state, you know, doing a few random things that take 2 minutes, you know, organizing, cleaning, just doing a little something that keeps you feeling like, you know what, I'm not a victim of circumstance. I'm not limited by my state. Letting go of those narratives and stories and things that you've told yourself about the way that things have to be, or the fact that you aren't okay unless things are a certain way. Things have to be a certain way for you to be okay. These are things that don't serve you. In my experience, the psyche is very sensitive. It's very impressionable. It's probably different for everyone. I know I have plenty of inner work still to do, and that work will never stop. There's no finish line for this. You know, and instead of looking at the obstacles and challenges as inconveniences or, you know, obstacles to your progress, why don't you look at them as a gift? You don't have to make the effort to, you know, create your own difficulties or you know, generate your own training regimen, mental training regimen. Life itself, man, God, the universe, it's all serving you up tests every day. It's serving up, you know, free game, free training. You know, oh, here's something that happened. That's going to make you late for work. Here's something that happened. You know, that's a challenging reality to deal with. Here's something that happened with someone that you care about, where you now, you know, you've got to step up and be there for someone. That's just, you know, that's your new assignment. There you go. Now, taking what's right in front of you and running with that. Doing the best you can at what's right in front of you. Doesn't matter what it is, but being present with that. And, that doesn't just mean like not thinking about the past or not thinking about the future, but only thinking about the current moment. Perhaps reflecting on your past week or planning the week ahead could be the most present thing you do all day. It's just being intentional about it, being dialed in as much as you can, but at the same time, having your radar available for any type of interruption, and ahead of time deciding that that's fine if that happens. Welcoming interruptions. In fact, that's the natural flow of life, and there's a reason for those interruptions. You then shift to that thing, and then you do your best with that. Doing your best and being your best are two different things. That's a distinction I've learned over time as well, is I've always been so hung up on being my best, as opposed to realizing I can be doing my best. Right now, I am far from at my best. I got a rough night of sleep. I would say I am a former chronic insomniac. That's really the first time I've verbally declared that I've overcome insomnia. I know I haven't fully overcome insomnia, but there was a period of many years, especially for those of you who know me well, where insomnia was, perhaps my biggest enemy, and for the most part, I've overcome it. I went through some therapy for it and things like that, and there's still remnants of those thought patterns, and the fact that my situation was a bit more psychological, fortunately, and less of an actual sleep disorder. In fact, not a sleep disorder. So that's an area I'm blessed. I can't fully relate to someone who has a true sleep disorder, though there is a lot of overlap. But that aside, point being, insomnia has returned a little bit in this past week or so. Most of the nights of the past week have been not optimal sleep. Ironically, my best night of sleep in the past week was 2 nights ago when we sprang forward on the clocks for the time change, which is, it's funny enough that actually would be, the night that I sleep the best. But I am doing my best right now, granted my current situation, despite my current potential quote unquote limitations, where my brain isn't potentially functioning at its best. The delivery of this message, this podcast, isn't. See, look, I used the word aren't. I wasn't talking about anything plural. This was a singular singular point that I just said aren't. Isn't. This message isn't being delivered as smoothly as it can be because I feel like my mind isn't at its best. But you know what? I'm willing to bet that had I gotten a full night of sleep, been feeling good, pumped up, in all facets, I don't think I would have pressed record. I don't think this podcast would be here. It wouldn't be. Flat out. This would not have been recorded. Plain and simple. And it's perhaps a better message than one where I've been at my best physically, mentally, cognitively. Just to think that you can always adapt, and the fact that the difficulties actually serve up potentially a better opportunity. One thing is always leading to another. Effort that you're putting in that seems like it's not getting anywhere, or that you're not getting that instant gratification or reward immediately following the pursuit, that effort's being stored. the foundation is being built. The reward now is going to present itself whenever it will. That's out of your control. What's in your control is showing up, putting in the work, and the fruits of your labor, will grow and ripen at their own pace. So, that's just to say it's interesting how sometimes as creators, those of you out there who pursue something creatively, or let's just say do any sort of work that you resist, really. We can broaden the scope, I think, past just the arts or creative work, but really with everyday assignments, roles, responsibilities, or areas of focus that you've got. We resist that work. And sometimes it takes an adverse event to show up to it. I haven't been podcasting. I released a podcast, 2.5 weeks ago. But even that one had been recorded 2 weeks prior. So really, it's been over a month since I've recorded, like a podcast clip intentionally, like this. I didn't even know this was going to be a podcast. I just started recording because that's something I do. I've been doing that. I do, hop on and press record, record little just talks, whatever, mind dumps, brainstorms, freestyles to, beats, music stuff. But quickly realized as I was recording this that this is something that maybe can help someone else who feels like they are limited by their circumstances or their environment or their own, personal well-being. It's like you can always redirect, you can always course correct, and you can always find a way to advance and progress. And it doesn't have to be in the the typical way that we think of progress or success as a culture. It can just be a few little things that keep the momentum going. Little things that you can pat yourself on the back for. It's Monday. I got myself into the gym. I didn't do a whole lot. I got in there though. That's half the reason I go to the gym. Is the feeling that I showed up afterwards, That sense of, hey, I showed up for myself despite the odds. Use the odds. You know what I mean? When the odds are against you, leverage that. That right there is a source of fuel that you often wouldn't consider to be, in my opinion. So anyway, I think I've got the point across. No sense in rambling too much further, other than the fact that, hey, even on your down days, not only can you still make progress in the normal way you do things, even maybe at a smaller, maybe at a slower rate, or maybe your reps are down, but you can still get them in. And even more importantly, maybe you can make a different type of progress. Maybe you can shift gears and try something different and find that, like, oh shoot, there's other ways that I can keep the momentum going, even when the outside forces feel like they're slowing your roll, So, anyway, make it a great week. Enjoy this sunshine. Yeah, that's about all I got. was going to say, well, by the time you hear this, you will have already enjoyed the week of sunshine, but we'll see. We'll see when I get this podcast out. You know, I don't need it to be perfect. I don't need a video to go with it. It's just a little message for y'all. And keep showing up. Control what you can control. Be great. All right. Peace.